Hello everyone, I am Anirudh Bhosle, Product Manager at Techspian. I welcome you all in the discussion and dialogue between industry experts on how artificial intelligence and machine learning became an important and accelerated digital transformation in pandemic. I'll brief you about the company. So in Techspian, we assist businesses with their technology roadmap in different areas like application development, automation, transformation, cloud, artificial intelligence, machine learning, mobile apps, along with many other services. So Techspian has always aims at making customers successful with their IT investments, and we strongly believe that a deep understanding of business is essential for creating meaningful solutions. So I would like to welcome a panelist for today. So our first panelist for today is Mr. Timothy Vaughan, Chief Product Officer at PCare from USA. He comes with 25 years of experience in delivering technology innovations to improve the practices and experience of healthcare. Our second panelist for today is Mr. Roberto Gennaro, Chief Digital Officer at RedTag from Canada. He holds a 16 plus years of experience in transforming the digital future of the company and drive growth by converting traditional to digital. Our third panelist for today is Mr. Vikas Chandak, SVP and Head Strategic Businesses, Financial Products, Partnership and Alliances at Intermiles from India. He is a highly performing executive leader with 17 years of experience in customer loyalty, financial services, aviation, and business consulting. So last panelist for today is Mr. Rohit Shukla, Director of Products at Key from USA, with over 14 years of experience as a product leader in various companies at various stages of growth, delivering mobile apps, web products with travel, e-com, fintech, working with engineers across geographical and cultural boundaries. So I would like to introduce the today's topic of discussion. So to start with, what is digital transformation? So basically, digital transformation is a holistic realignment or an investment into technology to optimize and redefine business models, internal processes, organizational cultures, and customer experience to boost efficiency and meet market and consumer demands. The concept behind digital transformation is how to use the technology to remake a process that is becoming more efficient and effective. So in today's world, why digital transformation is important? So it's basically important because it let businesses innovate digital technology so that they communicate, collaborate, and deliver services more efficiently and effectively. Other key benefits are basically that digital transformation, it allows companies to keep up with changes in the market and also increases profitability and customer satisfaction. And artificial and machine learning are going to be the future prominently in the many businesses digital transformation stages. With this COVID-19 highlight the difficulties some companies have faced when trying to meet customer demands and queries by remote locations, and many companies are focuses on enabling automated and self-service models. So, without wasting more time on the introduction, we'll just start the discussion. So, before starting the discussion, I would request the attendees that if they have any questions, please type the questions in the comment box with the names of the panelists to whom they want to ask the question, and we'll take all the questions before concluding the webinar. Okay, so I'll start with the questions. So, my first question is to Tim. Like, do you agree that artificial intelligence and machine learning are not differentiators and they are becoming essentials with it? And how are they important?
Sure. Thanks, Anirudh. Yeah, I'd say I start with maybe clarifying the term. For me, artificial intelligence is kind of the umbrella term. Within that, you have natural language processing, machine learning, deep learning. These technologies that really are kind of, I'll say, under that AI umbrella. And now, from my perspective, in healthcare specifically, there's really been an explosion of AI tools. A lot specifically in the diagnostics area. And even looking at tools from like Microsoft, AWS, Google, IBM. There's just so many different tools out there. So it is becoming, I'll say, an essential kind of part of what we do. And I'll reference a couple of statistics here. Optum did a survey. They do one every year on AI. And the most recent survey was from 2019. So, it's maybe a year old now. But, 85% of healthcare leaders, they said they've implemented an AI strategy. And 97% of them said they trusted AI to support, at least administrative functions. And so, I'll say, but as background, I personally think that, and while there's these great platforms out there, there's still, I'll say significant opportunities to create differentiated solutions through this AI, platform and technology. And a lot of that is really kind of how we connect kind of our own data sets or pulling data in from different places, and creating some unique applications on top of, what I'll call this AI kind of platform or capability. And, so, and I'll say the other thing, as part of this, in addition to these big platforms, so it is becoming kind of more of a commodity, I'll say, but there's a lot of smaller niche players that are out there as well, doing very specific things kind of in the AI space. I see a lot of that, particularly in, NLP specifically, that, there's just capabilities that you can't find with the bigger platform. So I do think there are differentiators available, but it is an essential. So kind of a long-winded way to answer that question, Anirudh.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And so, Vikas, what's your thoughts on this?
So for us, the industry is very different and much more impulsive than healthcare, which is more need-based and more proactive. I think in the loyalty and the commerce space, the conversation's moving much faster towards mobile, and we operate on all channels, right? As Intermiles is kind of an FFP, which is transitioning to being a loyalty program on its own, and we have operations on the fintech side, on the commerce side, as well as on the travel side. So for us, across all of this, stitching databases together and giving a personalized experience to the users, detecting frauds, are use cases that are no longer just a fanciful term. These are hygiene, these are expected by our users. So while we agree that it is completely becoming an essential, yet the ability to do this across programs and across platforms is very varied. So I think it is an expectation, but I think the differentiation, as Tim said, there is still an opportunity to differentiate quite a bit, because you can be as personalized as a Google or Amazon is, or you can be as laid back about just personalizing your email or contents, right? So I think there is a wide range to cover there, and your investments and your philosophy behind it can create a lot of differentiation still.
Yeah. And what do you feel how important they are?
Oh, important. So importance, as I said, right? Our industry is such that if you do not personalize, then you are in the data business for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Right? So if I am here to monetize the customer's time and create an opportunity for him to spend money with me, I think I have to be as personalized. So for me, basic level of personalization, historical data, and I cannot do that on a manual basis and on the erstwhile segmentation basis, right?
Yeah.
So machine learning is a given, and machine learning driven frameworks for pricing optimization, for fraud detection is a given. AI, I think, is not essential yet. AI, I think, is still a little distance away, but I think the larger players in the area, in travel, in fintech, I think they are looking at that with NLP and DL, deep learning. I think much in a much more stronger way.
Yeah. So, Roberto, what are your views on the
Yeah,
same?
so I'd agree with Vikas that there's a massive opportunity, but at the same time, we think that it's a big undertaking for organizations to do it and do it right. AI and ML has been a buzzword for a few years now. We'll say maybe longer. We're in the travel space, and we know that in this age of digital disruption, where technology and society are evolving faster than our ability to adapt. Us as technology leaders, I'm in the digital space. I'm not on, more on the dev side, but I have input and I find innovations that I bring to my development team. I think it's very important, and especially moving forward in post-pandemic, where we're going to have fewer bodies to leverage. AI and ML will play a bigger role, especially with efficiencies within our organization. And I think Vikas touched on the personalization side of it. We're in the business of driving customers to the website and getting them to convert. If the experience is not at what they're expecting, especially within the travel space and maybe within the fintech side, our customers really are one click away. Like for me, I can go to my travel site, or within one click, I'm off to another competitor that's maybe going to give me a better experience and more personalized, and helping me convert a lot quicker. So I think for us, it's going to play a bigger role, and more on the machine learning side and more on the predictive and recommendation engines than the AI side as we start to evolve our team in-house. but definitely something that's on our roadmap into 2021.
Yeah. So Rohit, we would like to know your views on the same.
So in my view, AI and ML, they are just tools to be used for your specific use cases. So Vikas and Roberto already touched a little bit on travel and e-commerce, and I come from the same space. So when I look at the main use cases where not so much AI, but ML is used, and we have done a little bit there too, is one on personalization or recommendation. So if you think about travel, somebody is searching for something, you are going to give them hundreds and hundreds of results. But what you are trying to do is you are trying to get the person to convert. There is the old way of doing it, which is like you have whatever sorting logic that you have written, and there is a smarter way of doing it where you are like, oh, here are the results that are most relevant to you. And if you take that same use case and take it away from a desktop or a mobile, think about integrations with Alexa, Siri, Google Home, whatever, right? So when somebody is engaging with your service using voice, you can't give the person hundreds of results. You have to figure out what are going to be maybe the top one result or the top three results that are going to be relevant for that person. So it's the same travel use case, but thought about it differently. You have to find a better way. And that's where, to me, ML is just a tool which helps you do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, true. So we'll move to the second question. So to start with, Rohit, according to you, what are the key advantages you see in leveraging artificial intelligence?
So I would say two main things, and that, to me, those again boil down to sort of two verticals. The way I look at it, one is on the end consumer side, and there the business goal is all about conversion. And then the other vertical that I look at is operational efficiency. So we already touched on this one example from a conversion standpoint. I'll just quickly talk about the second example where it's about operational efficiency. And I think Vikas touched on that a little bit when he talked about fraud detection, right? So if you think about travel space or e-commerce space, fraud detection is a big deal. And how do you typically go about doing fraud detection? Initially, people used to have these business rules, and I've also worked on a few applications where we try to write business rules. But you can keep writing business rules, and the fraudsters will continue to become smarter. How do you leverage larger data sets? They may be either your in-house data sets or combine them with other data sets that may be out there from third parties and try and find patterns. Humans probably will not be very good at it. They may be able to do it, not so effective, but it is going to take a long time. So that's another use case from an operational efficiency standpoint. And then there are a few other things that we have done. But if you look at it, I look at it as two verticals, business goal being conversion and then operational efficiency.
Yeah. So, Roberto, what are your views? What are the advantages you see in leveraging artificial intelligence?
So, especially within, so fraud for us especially is one of, we've actually, we used to throw bodies at the problem, trying to do it manual. And then we incorporated an AI solution that we met at a travel conference several years ago. And the AI was getting smarter as it went. It understood groups or organizations of fraudsters that we would never be able to catch if it was, a manual person doing it. Understanding, the behavior on the website, how many times did they visit before they converted? Within travel, that's a big signal to say, if it's fraud or not. Nobody's going to visit your site for the very first time, a brand new visit, and spend $8,000 on a trip. We see data that's, 12 times before they convert. Fair forecasting is another one that I think has a big opportunity within the travel space. Understanding when to buy, if I should buy now or if I should wait. Travel assistants, the virtual travel assistant, trying to make them smarter. And then again, we come down to the customer segmentation and personalization. I think is going to be a big area of success when we do roll that out.
Okay, yeah. So Tim, we would like to hear from you.
Yeah, great. And I think, our industry and the part of the industry that we're in is very different probably from, from the other panelists here in terms of healthcare. So, to give you a little background, so P-Care is in the business of driving digital patient engagement. So across the care continuum, but really engaging patients in their care. So there's really two kind of primary aspects as we look at how we can leverage AI kind of technologies in our business and to help our clients is really one, personalization. So really kind of helping kind of drive a personalized care journey for every patient to really engage them more effectively in their care, which does a lot of things in terms of driving outcomes, in terms of their health outcomes, but also reducing consumption of healthcare services to drive down costs and that sort of thing. And the other piece of that that we're looking at is really more focused on what I call operational efficiency. So doing things with AI like natural language processing and looking at broad sets of unstructured data and pulling out intelligence from that to really it could drive more personalization for the patient clearly, but it also just saves time operationally for our health systems in driving better care. So when do we need to have a human intervene in that care experience and leveraging the technology to drive those as opposed to it being picking up the phone, so chat bots, that sort of thing too. So I'd say from that perspective, it's really personalization and really driving operational efficiency are the two focus areas that we kind of are looking at as we think about how to really kind of create that optimal experience for the care journey.
Yeah. So as you are giving use cases with your answer, so I would like to know more about the use cases, like how artificial intelligence and machine learning has been around with you in impact, like working. So because I would like to hear from you more from the use case perspectives.
Yeah, I was about to actually start there, that I think this is more about talking about use cases that you actually.
Right. Yeah.
So I'll rattle off a few, and I'm sure some of these will, benchmark against different industries. I think for us in the travel space, fraud and talking to external databases and syncing up on patterns that we see, whether it is through IP tracking, whether it is through machine fingerprinting, or even through the way typing happens on the keypad versus what you see normally when a member logs in. Both on the fintech side and on the travel side, those are strong use cases that we have started implementing, and we are already seeing savings, right? I think being a loyalty program, one of our largest costs are redemptions. So at the time of redemptions, there are two things that we have to be extremely careful about, and we have an FFP heritage, right? So the error margins have been larger in the past than they are now because we are now migrating to not being an FFP. And I think therefore what has become interesting is one, price optimization. When you come to my site and my play for redemptions, at the same time delivering differential value to different tiers in the program, right? And this is a complex algorithm where, let's say I'm selling an airline ticket for miles instead of for rupees, and I still want to make sure that it's available, right, across different times and different airlines, but at the same time it is available at a cost which the member likes and thinks that has a higher perceived value than it had earlier, and yet it is not running me or bleeding me as a program beyond a certain point, right? So the ability to manage different constraints in a real-time basis via an algorithm is not humanly possible. It's not possible through basic rule engines also, because you have to apply constraints which are historical and cumulative in nature. It is something that a machine needs to identify as patterns for the day. What is the kind of cost you're incurring for a particular flight for a future booking date versus today's date, and open up inventory accordingly. Right. So just like an airline does revenue management, for us in the loyalty program on the redemption side, we actually run an ML in the revenue management play where we have to keep into account different parameters of success, and the machine itself starts adjusting to the different volumes, and it has its constraints that it needs to operate in. I think the third piece where we are starting to invest our time now is chatbots. Actually, there is a huge cost that servicing has on a loyalty program, and more often than not, we realize that post-COVID, picking up the phone, calling people is something that people detest now, right? Or the whole day you're on calls. You don't want to be on another call for a servicing thing. So people prefer sending an email or a chat, and the entire thread needs to be threaded, right? There needs to be intelligent assistants which make people feel heard even before a human has got to it, right? And you cannot deploy, and as I think I heard Roberto say, right, for fraud and for servicing, initially you end up throwing bodies at it, and you end up throwing, and you track AHTs and all of those things. But where we have reached is a point where we want to make sure that customers see a quick turnaround, but we can't be incurring costs beyond the point. So I think that's the second area where we are in a big way looking to change this. And the third, I think Rohit mentioned this. I think there is personalization and there is relevance, right? Now, personalization is easier to crack through MarTech investments. Relevance is the difficult area, right? Where what you show as an offer, how do you optimize it to the user's history and his buying behavior with you? And we have data sets which range from commerce to fintech to travel. It becomes extremely important for us to be able to create relevance for the member in the program. Keep showing him the next thing he should be doing with us based on the patterns we see emerging in the portfolio as a whole and the lookalike models as a whole. Now, essentially for me, therefore, all of these use cases are about large quantities of data, patterns that are not easily visible through exploratory analysis to human beings, and patterns that are changing rapidly, right? That will not be static in nature, and therefore you can't just deploy business rules and forget about it. And hence you need an evolutionary model which can support these. And I think those are the use cases we are really gunning for.
So Tim, we would like to hear from you from the healthcare perspective, like what kind of use cases you are handling.
Yeah, and so I kind of started to talk about some of those in my last response, but so I'll start with natural language processing and looking at unstructured data. So, we have access in healthcare to a lot of unstructured data. It comes in different forms, surveys, patient comments, rounds, things that happen in patient interactions, notes in the EMR, for example. And so, the first piece for us is, taking that, and depending on the use case, really there's different sorts of NLP algorithms that have to be applied to that, and different, elements that pulled out. And then typically, there's a several step process, and then you get the machine learning that kind of takes that data, kind of applies the next level of rules to that and kind of figures out what's going to happen with that data. So, for example, we do a lot of work in, we call them rounds or surveys, getting feedback from patients, a lot of unstructured data. And so, there's a lot of, kind of that NLP piece that happens to really drive kind of not only into, what the themes are, what the sentiments are, right? Those are some of the basic pieces, but now machine learning is helping us actually extract kind of root cause and even some of the, also countermeasures or opportunities for improvement. And that just continues to get smarter and smarter, as more data is fed into the system. And I talked about also just kind of really personalizing care experiences. So, for us, the medical record in healthcare is kind of I'll say the king, right? It's where the vast majority of data kind of lives, and the health system's really, it's their lifeblood. And pulling data, from the comments or the notes, specifically in the EMR that are entered by the clinicians, a lot of that data is not stored, in a structured way. And so really pulling that unstructured data can help predict things like likelihood for a patient to readmit, and then what sort of interventions can be applied to drive that. And so we're really seeing a lot of, I'll say, interest in that area, combined with things like social determinants of health, kind of the psychographic data as well to drive different sorts of decisions in terms of the healthcare process. And again, really, when do you digitally engage the patient versus when you have to have a human intervene with them to improve their care. And then the last piece that I mentioned before was chatbots, and that's the area we're just starting to kind of really look at and explore as well. But in healthcare in general, I'll say that chatbots are something that are pretty widely used. Patients in terms of looking for what sort of care do I need? Do I need to go to the EMR or to the ER? I mean, or do I need, can I just go to a clinic, or can I get my care online? And so can I connect to a telehealth provider, for example? And so chatbots are very, very helpful from that perspective of really personalizing the care, but taking that load off of the health system, reducing their resource requirements to serve patients in the ways that make sense to them. So those are kind of, I'll say, three kind of key use areas or use cases that that we see in our part of the healthcare ecosystem that we're serving.
So Rohit, as Vikas gave some use cases about travel, we would like to hear from you from an e-commerce and a fintech perspective. Some use cases.
So I'll give you just one use case that we applied in my current company. So here is a little bit of context. So what we do is we are a one-stop shop for travelers who have booked a vacation rental. And these vacation rentals are high-end vacation rentals. Think for $500 up a night. So that's just a bit the base. So the idea here is that these people have more money than time, and whenever they are taking a vacation, they really want to make sure that the vacation is awesome. So when they reach out to us, we provide them highly personalized recommendation in a high touch manner. So what that means is our recommendations obviously have to be very relevant to these people. So we live up to our value prop. And because it is high touch, while we want to provide a high touch experience, we don't want to do it at a very higher price point in terms of cost. So what we did was we started working on sort of a recommendation engine. And because we are talking about these people who are sort of like the top 2% of the US population, and we are also not in a lot of markets. So our challenge was we didn't really have a lot of historical data set, and yet we were trying to figure out how machine learning can help us. So we tried to come up with a recommendation engine, which takes all the inputs from people. So they can tell us how many people, what are their likes, dislikes, preferences, and whatnot. And then we take all of that into account. And then what we try to do is look at our historical data set, look at other people who have booked things in the past, and try to do a little bit of pattern recognition, and then spit out the recommendation that most likely appeals to these folks. So that's just the first part of it, which is like provide them recommendation. And then what we also do is, sure, I can spit out recommendation all day long, but how do I know that the recommendation is effective? So then we also look at the behavior of people on the recommendation. So it's like, okay, were they interested in the recommendation? What did they eventually end up booking? And we again take all that data and feed it back into our system. So our use case really is just a recommendation engine, but I wanted to kind of bring in a few of those points, which is like, typically people say that machine learning is effective when you have a larger data set. I believe that is true, but there are other ways of leveraging it as well. So you could try and leverage machine learning with a little bit of human element to it, and a few other things of how do you provide feedback to your model that it continues learning.
Okay, thanks. And so Roberto, we'd like to hear from you some use cases which you have come across.
Yeah, for me, it looks like there's a certain theme amongst all the panelists, and what I can say is that so COVID-19 has pretty much catapulted us all into the future. And I was reading an article the other day that global e-commerce sales growth jumped 3 years in the first 3 months of stay-at-home mandates. And in the US, just from April to May, I believe it was, they did more sales in those few months than the last 12 Cyber Mondays combined. So a lot more people are staying home, obviously, and everybody's connected. Where we saw, prior to COVID, our mobile traffic was spiking. As people started to stay home, the use case is different because now the user's more on their desktop. There's still a lot of mobile traffic, but a lot more desktop. What we've seen use cases in is predictive search, recommendation engine, which I've heard throughout, and we've actually leveraged chatbots within our site. As soon as COVID hit, our call centers got flooded. We had thousands of people trying to call and get help, people that were stranded. Our mandate was bring Canadians home first. People that were traveling within 2 weeks, we'll worry about them later. So we incorporated a chatbot on our site that was strictly COVID, and it alleviated all of the stress off of the call center, which they were just getting flooded. So I think having self-serve options, and I can't remember which panelist mentioned that, for the user, for them to go seek the information themselves versus wait and if it's an email or a phone call, that aspect of it makes it a lot easier, right? And again, personalization came up, and we don't need personalization, we need the right personalization. Customers today will give us their data if it saves them time, if we offer them a discount, but most of all, if we display the right product. Having personalization is great, but if I'm giving Tim personalization that's not really relevant to him because we think it is, we need to look at the data and understand how they're interacting with it, and really understanding that if I delivered a data set to you and you didn't take an action on it, let's not keep delivering this, right? And I think Google's done a great job, especially with their ad algorithm. If you're not clicking on it, we're not going to show it to you because it's not relevant to you, right? So I think those are a few use cases that that we've seen that that have helped us for sure.
Okay. So, Vikas, I would like to know from you, like how top IT companies are altering their focuses on artificial intelligence and machine learning. How
Look,
they're
I think
moving.
unfortunately I might not be the best person to answer that particular question, right? I have an out and out till date business side of the experience.
Okay.
I am the one demanding IT application towards AI
Okay.
on how this can be done. But I can tell you what we as an organization are trying to focus on this.
Mhm.
Challenges we usually face whenever we talk about an machine learning implementation. And as I said, AI is not something that we are yet in the domain of. I think machine learning is something we definitely are looking at. I think disparate data sources, right? And I heard Timothy say unstructured data is one of the areas where you implemented, but collect all of those data sets and the concurrency of that data, right? A latency in data actually puts your entire model, renders your entire model sometimes useless depending on the use case. But the concurrency of that data and the availability of that data is becoming one of the big challenges that we see because we have, as I said, disparate set of use cases that we are trying to achieve. The second issue that we sometimes face is basic level understanding at the ground level, right? On what's an RPA versus what an ML versus what is an AI use case. I think the blurring lines between an ML and AI in common understanding often creates a challenge in terms of what actually are you trying to achieve out of this and where should you stop with that particular algorithm. The third piece is in our customer experience. While ML is a great deal, when you try and implement every shiny use case that you come across, sometimes you end up creating a lag or a load time issue or some kind of a customer experience issue because your borderline use cases start to fail. And I know I'm getting granular here, but essentially that's a challenge that as a business guy, we are trying to say that we need to prioritize a use case where the impact is large enough for us to invest our monies in. And I think the fourth area is essentially it's not just about running an algorithm. You need to invest through the entire funnel, right? You need to have a MarTech investment that can match up to your algorithms. You need to have design changes that can match up to your algorithm. So we often fail to acknowledge the entire use case and the investment required end to end. So I think when you are looking at how IT professionals are altering the focus, I think narrowly focusing only on ML implementation without understanding end-to-end use cases and ROIs and the kind of implications it has is something that we as business people definitely are challenging. But I think there are better people on this panel to say how IT professionals are looking at it.
Yeah, sure. So, so Rohit, we would like to hear from you now. So, like how IT professionals are altering their focuses, how they're implementing it.
So I'll share probably a very different viewpoint on this. So when we started doing this, the recommendation engine piece that I talked about, right? So I was the product manager. I still am. But the tricky part was to wrap your head around the fact that you are now going to have an output which you are tempted to test beforehand before it goes out to production, but you can't. And it took a long time for me to convince myself and then to convince other people, because we obviously have this thing of any release that goes out, you have to test that release before it goes to production, right? But it was very hard to figure out a way to test the whole recommendation engine thing, where it's like, oh, well, it can spit out recommendation based on the individual criteria. So what do you test? So that actually is, I would say, I still haven't figured out a way to take that and explain it to other people. Finally, I kind of got convinced that nope, you have to stop and you have to trust the system. But I still don't know how I can take that same learning and go out and convince other people. So that was a challenge, which I think it was unique.
Okay.
Sorry, if I could intervene here, and Rohit, I think brilliant point of view. I think we had the same issue. What our tech guys then decided, and our design guys actually decided, is maybe there's a way to A/B test this, release the machine algorithm only to a few people and test the conversion funnel there versus elsewhere. But again, depending on the use case, this could be an entirely different challenge.
Yeah, so because that's actually a very good point, and I'll throw this other thing there. So while it is not necessarily related to AI ML, but people talk about A/B testing, right? And you mentioned that you could do A/B testing and try the effectiveness of the algorithm. I think that is a very valid point. In our case, because our demand or rather our traffic to the site is not so much, that A/B testing would have made a lot of sense. So for the audience, I kind of want to draw that attention there, that yes, you definitely can A/B test, as Vikas mentioned. You may just want to take a look at your traffic and see if A/B testing would be the right strategy in that case.
Yeah. Okay. So Tim, what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's two perspectives here, and I think was it Vikas that was sharing some of those. But there's this, you want to kind of take a look at all the use cases and figure the whole program out, implement, right? But that's not realistic. And so I think and I'm on the product side too. I'm not in the IT space, so I'm not probably the best person to answer this question either. But that's the challenge that I kind of look at is, I want to really think through, like, kind of what the end game going to be for for applying this technology. But really what I think we need to do is really start small and, kind of think through a really small use case, put it in place, learn and evolve, because, this technology really is, at least for me, it's new, right? And it's newer to, kind of our application and what we're doing, with our clients. And so, we can't probably, build the full end game solution, but we can start small, do some small things, and then kind of evolve that over. So, and I don't know how that applies to what IT professionals are doing, but that's just my perspective on terms of kind of how we're thinking about, kind of, rolling this technology through into our business. And really, so we're a SaaS-based service provider. So, we don't own the end, patient relationship, right? It's through our clients that we do that. And so everything that we do, we have to kind of work with our clients first and then to get to the patient. So we've got several steps here where I think, some of the other panelists, I think, have a more direct kind of responsibility or capability to kind of, do some of this and test the technology more directly with their end user customers.
Okay. So as we are moving forward, so fundamentally, artificial intelligence and machine learning are equally important in both sides, and operationally efficient and improving bottom line. So everyone want to leverage it. So what are the some main challenges that businesses are facing? So I want to hear that, Tim, from you. Like, what kind of challenges businesses are facing to implement it?
What kind of challenges businesses are facing in terms of leveraging? I mean, I think, like I was saying, to me, it's getting started. Really, I think that's probably the biggest challenge for a lot of what I'm seeing anyway is, really just kind of getting off the starting mark and putting some technologies into play. And I think, part of the other thing I think that's a challenge, and maybe even, we're seeing this here a little bit, is there's a lack of clarity around what is AI, what is ML, what is NLP, kind of all these different things, and people get confused around the terms. And so some of it is even just like kind of cutting through that clutter and just kind of really getting to the use cases and talking through what those are, because it's, I think there's a lot of confusion. And so that's one of the challenges that I'm seeing. And then the last one I'll say is just, you have to think differently about the business. And Rohit mentioned this, right? Because some of this stuff is, you can't do the same kind of testing that you do, right, with traditional software. And so getting people comfortable kind of taking that leap, in certain areas anyway, is more challenging. I think it's easier to do if it's, kind of just on the analytics side. Once you put it into, predictions and into the, the flow of your process, it becomes a bigger challenge.
So Rohit, as you mentioned, apart from the A/B testing part, so what do you think some other challenges that companies are facing apart from the testing front?
So I would say two things. One is separating the hype from the actuality. So sure, AI ML is a big word. People are talking about that being the future and all of that, which is all true. The way I look at it is, first and foremost, as a business, the fundamentals don't necessarily change. What are the goals that we are trying to achieve? And what's the best way of achieving that goal? Some use cases are well suited for AI ML, some may not. Some use cases may require a partnership between, I would say, machines and humans. And that's a very different challenge altogether. Sure, you will have all your traditional challenges of ML, AI, and whatnot, but you will also face a challenge of rolling it out, because when humans are involved, you have to make sure that change management is appropriately taken care of. So that's one side of it. The other thing that I would say is machine learning, not so much AI, don't know enough about it, but you have to have a larger data set for any of your recommendations or basically whatever you are trying to figure out through machine learning to actually make sense. So lack of data, or rather lack of larger data sets, and then the related to data being in multiple places, fragmented. So the first and foremost thing really is for you to understand where your data is, bring it all together, and Tim mentioned it previously in healthcare. You have different type of data, and Vikas talked about people parsing through emails and whatnot, right? So there may be a lot of scattered data. How do you bring it all together for it to even make sense?
Okay. So because mainly from a travel perspective, as a from a travel brand, what do you feel as a in travel companies? What is the challenges they are facing, or any other companies?
Yep. So I think I went through some of these challenges, and honestly, those are the challenges we as a team faced, right? Basic understanding. And I echo exactly what Rohit and Tim said, that you need to differentiate between the hype and the actual use cases. These are tools to eventually achieve your business goals, and the goal has to take priority over whether it is a simple rule engine or whether it is ML or even to the extent of AI or a GPT 3.0, right? It doesn't matter what the tool you use is, it has to eventually serve the business purpose. I think for us, the avoiding every shimmery, shiny goal on implementing an ML or some kind of an algorithm there, and not having a knowledge, as Rohit said, on the end users experience of it is a risk that we try and make sure that therefore we test it out in levels before we release it to a larger population. Not always easy to do, and not
Right.
always to infer the results also. And therefore, I think the constant challenge is which use cases do you make larger and how do you prioritize the implementation. And as Tim said, the basic analytics use cases sometimes are simpler because you can try historical databases and see different outcomes on how that would perform based on the model. But when you are trying to put it in a user experience, like Rohit said, it becomes extremely difficult to convince teams that you need to go live with this and this will serve the purpose, because you're then playing with live customers. And in our case, I think the idea is basically to solve the underlying data problem and understanding problem and prioritization problem. I think if you can solve 2 or 3 of these, I think essentially you're at least having an idea of what are the next steps on this journey for yourselves.
So basically, it's more important while getting into the business, people should look at the use cases first, like what
No,
is
I
being
think
implemented.
as I said, right, the challenges are the same as Tim and Rohit said. It is unstructured data, data lying in different places, concurrency and latency depending on the use case, and an overall understanding of which use cases qualify for ML and which can be solved by a much simpler implementation.
Yeah.
But I think the evolution then is, once you understand this, how do you know which use cases are more priority? And I understand what Tim said, that you should be looking to implement small. And I think we have probably in our journey done a few of those because analytics wise, we have been on ML for a while now. But now we are getting into chatbots and user experiences. And those are areas where you're actually messing with the user's overall experience with the program, right? In an explicit way. It's not an implicit approach, it's an explicit approach. You need to be a little more careful there, and how much do you want to disrupt there? I think those are the areas you want to be careful about.
So Roberto,
And
what are
and
your okay? Sorry. Yeah, yes, right.
sorry, if I may just add to what Vikas said. So it really is about, if we think about all of this, right, it is about instilling confidence in the organization. So as Tim said, start small, and Vikas echoed that point. So once you start small, and then start small, measure the results, share those results with other people. So now you are able to instill confidence in the organization to kind of take slightly bolder steps. Because sometimes what also happens, although I've not seen it happen in the context of AI ML, but sometimes what happens is people will roll out some initiatives. And when those initiatives don't perform, especially if those initiatives were opposed by a few internal folks, and if they are not performing at the same level or at the same level of urgency, the organizations have a tendency of rolling them back. And live chat is a good example. I'm not talking about chatbots. I'm just talking about typical, normal, simple live chat in our company. We rolled out live chat and then we took it down. And I'll not get into the details of it, but the thing that I'm saying there is you have to instill confidence in the organization. Otherwise, you may end up spending time and money and then just rolling it back for lack of success that you shared with others.
So, Roberto, what are your thoughts on this? Like, what are the challenges?
I think a lot of valid points, and to Rohit's live chat example, what I can say is that we've struggled with change in the past, and people don't like change. You know, something that's so good like a live chat can help so many people, and especially on the customer experience side, that the user or the person managing the live chat has frustration with it, doesn't understand really how to message back and forth, creates problems, and then you end up rolling it back when it's, you know, a great tool. What I would say is first is having the buy-in from the organization on the AI and the ML if you're deciding to roll this out, because if there's any pushback, it's going to make your job as, you know, as an innovative leader to proceed and do better that much harder. So I think having the right team that's focused on AI and ML, but truly understanding what the core functionality is before you start to actually develop an application. And then obviously what's in the best interest of the user, because at the end of the day, I know a few of us are in the travel space and healthcare. The consumer is the one that's going to be benefiting from it. So if we don't really understand what's the best interest of the user, the customer, whatever we want to call them, that's going to make everything a lot more difficult to get to fruition and to get to production. Having the right, you know, research and actually having a development team that, you know, I can't remember who said it, that, you know, your goals, some of them are not going to work, and you have to understand that. And if it's, you know, management or you know, the board that's looking over the project, and they're saying, well, this isn't going to work, we're not going to invest in it, you know, it's going to take time and a lot of effort. But there's a lot of tools out there today, you know, like simple things like a chatbot makes, you know, customers' life a lot easier, especially for the brands. Tools out there today that, you know, there's a lot of development that's already done that can help us out and make, you know, building a lot easier moving forward. But and I think it was Timothy had said that it's data. You know, data is going to be the key. Having enough data to understand what to do with it is obviously a challenge that's facing a lot of business leaders today.
So thank you for sharing your views and knowledge. So we'll take some questions. So from the attendees, do you have any questions? I have one question from Shraddha. So anybody else, do you have any questions, you can drop in the Q&A section. So the question is for Vikas. It's important to be relevant in a case of loyalty space as it's repeating customer. Is it important?
Yeah, I think there are two questions from Shraddha embedded there.
Yeah.
I think, so is it important? I think it is extremely important. Loyalty is all about being able to attend personally to a lot of your high value customers, and yet you cannot always just throw bodies at it, right? So the ability to personalize and create a relevant experience, and the ability to show differentiation to the members themselves between their experiences is extremely important for us as a program, right? The differentiation between members is sometimes what also drives their loyalty more and more, knowing that they are looking at something more advanced in the program. So I think any loyalty program, leave aside whether it's FFP or not, the personalization, relevance, and offer optimization and pricing optimization is must-haves. So you are not going to be able to avoid that.
She has one more question, like how AI has helped Intermiles in the last few years.
Yeah, so AI is not a word I
Yeah,
subscribe to
yeah,
yet,
you are doing ML.
enterprise domain at least, and I
Yeah.
think we have a very honest panel about that. I think that it's more of a buzzword for us right now. But ML, machine learning, I think the specific use cases I talked about, I'll summarize it quickly. I think pricing optimization on the redemption side is extremely relevant. It directly impacts our bottom line. Fraud detection and playing with multiple databases to do that in travel and in redemption and account takeover cases. I think extremely relevant for loyalty currencies, which are kind of a prepaid digital wallet of sorts, right? If you equivalent them to a fintech play, there is stored value in your account, so you don't want to lose that. The third aspect is offer optimization and relevance creation. I think that is extremely relevant to us. And the fourth broader is an overall experience, because we have our own captive funnels for travel and for dining and other aspects. I think more than personalization, creating that relevance in the funnel and not showing them 200 results all the time, and remarketing to them about what we think might attract their attention more. I think these are 3, 4 areas where we have invested heavily, and the ones that are in the works is essentially a chatbot where we want to offload servicing there. So those are the 4, 5 use cases where Intermiles has invested its time.
Yeah, thanks. The next question is for Rohit from Ayushi. So her question is, how can we overcome the lack of human touch in AI?
So I'll answer that question by first defining what human touch really means. So the way I look at it is two pieces. One is the channel through which a human wants to interact. That channel could be a phone call. That channel could be just doing a search on a particular platform. It could be a voice assistant, whatever, right? So that's one channel. Then the other part is, what is the human trying to get out of it? So as an example, if say I reach out to a company through whatever channel, and I'm not even talking about AI ML here, I'm just simply talking about a simple human user experience. And if say I'm reaching out to the company, and this is my fourth time reaching out for the same issue, and I've reached out to the company through 3 other channels, and I've not gotten a response, and I'm so frustrated, right? So what would be an experience that would satisfy me? Obviously, first resolve my issue. And before you actually resolve my issue, at least acknowledge that, yes, I've reached out to you guys 3 times or 4 times and nothing has been done. So that's the human experience. How can you actually create that experience? And it doesn't have to be AI ML, right? It's a simple thing of not having different organizational silos because different channels were being treated differently. But that's one example, which is where the human experience comes into play. Now, the other thing about the channel. So a lot of people have talked about chatbots, right? So my personal problem with chatbots is that the kind of chatbots that have been created from the get-go, and it's been a few years in the industry and chatbots have come a long way, but the original chatbots, they were just clunky. They were worse. So in terms of the user experience that they provided, it was not good. So in terms of the channel, whatever we are implementing, we need to look at why would somebody interact with a chatbot? What is the human expectation from the chatbot, and just deliver on that. And as we have said, that we don't have to boil the ocean. We could start with a very simple use case and say in travel, it could be a very simple use case of this chatbot is only to serve for, say, PNR changes, as an example. And I think Roberto talked about a very good use case about the bringing Canadians home for that maybe one use case. Perfect use case. Just focus on that particular thing because there is a human component involved in it, and it is small enough for you to do a good job there.
Thanks, Rohit. So there's one more question. The question is to Roberto. So it's can you give few examples of how you have used ML in your organization till now? Roberto, you are on mute. Sorry.
Yeah. So there's probably a few use cases I can think of quickly that we're using and leveraged ML. One, obviously, I think Rohit touched on was the use case of the chatbot. Again, it was personalized. It was human to the point that we helped, the user, the customer, get access so that they can self-serve their needs relatively quickly versus waiting on the phone for hours during the COVID had hit. Another use case would be we use an application for A/B testing. So one of the Adobe applications, so giving the customer a different experience every time they're visiting. The one downfall with that is if the customer's calling our travel agent and they're saying, "Hi, I'm on your site and I see this," the agent's seeing a completely different experience because we've personalized it for the customer. So that's a good use case, and that's helped obviously drive conversions. Another use case would be fraud. Again, instead of throwing people at the problem, we went with an application, and it learned as it went. Flagging certain groups of individuals for fraud, did a great job for us. And I think that those are three really quick use cases for ML that we've used personally within our organization. And one that we're just about to launch is a brand new brand, strictly booking hotels via Messenger, SMS, WhatsApp, and Facebook. Completely trying to give that customer the ability to strictly book via mobile device without any interaction of a human from start to finish. Unless they want to speak to an agent, there's going to be a button.
Sorry, I was on mute. So thanks, Roberto, for answering the question. And so I think there are no more questions. So I hope all the questions have been cleared, whatever were asked. And I would like to conclude the seminar by saying that because of the pandemic, we are witnessing out of the box thinking and once in a lifetime risk taking that's giving birth to the fantastic innovations. So also those companies who are able to use these technologies will and rethink to the business model will be future fast at the digital transformation and will be ahead in the competition. Yeah, and so I would extend my special thanks to our today's panelist, Mr. Timothy Vaughan, Mr. Roberto Ginario, Mr. Vikas Chandak, Mr. Rohit Shukla for sharing the views and experiences with us today. It was very great to hear from you, your experiences, the use cases which you shared. And I would also like to thank the attendees for attending the webinars. And to more about the Techspian services, you can visit our website techspian.com, or you can reach out to us at info@techspian.com, and you can also follow our LinkedIn page for more updates and upcoming webinars. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.